All right, back on the morning drive, 63 degrees. It's getting even cooler here on the morning drive. That's a good thing. 2411059 is our number. Always happy to have our next guest in with us. He is from Valdosta State University, Dr. James Laplante. James, good morning. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing well, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here. And I'm sure like the rest of us, or like most of the rest of us, you watched with some intenseness the last two presidential conventions, the Republican convention in Tampa and last week the Democratic convention in Charlotte. And take anything away from it other than the normal stuff you see at conventions?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, we're going to have about 130 to 140 million people vote this November in the general election. And then if you look at the viewership of the Republican convention in Tampa and the Democratic convention in Charlotte, it was somewhere between 30 and 35 million, particularly when the nominees spoke. And so these conventions are really speaking to the base. I mean, they're speaking to the base of the parties. And I think in that sense, both conventions, the Republicans as well as the Democrats, did a fine job energizing their base, speaking to their base. But, what you saw, Romney spoke about this, Obama spoke about this. I mean, you have a very clear contrast between these two parties, and it's what the candidates stand for, it's what the parties stand for. And I would say we probably have more polarization and a greater distinction between the two parties than at any time in our lifetime. I mean, some people are saying really since the New Deal coalition that you've seen this kind of contrast. So the parties did what they needed to do, which was to energize their base. I'm not sure they did a lot for those swing voters, for those voters in the middle, but it's a tiny percentage too. It's just a tiny percentage that are left undecided.
That's right, and I thought CBS News. I saw this weekend. They did a pretty good job of. They got together. I don't know. The group was maybe a dozen or 2 dozen people who are undecided voters, and they said, "Okay, what are the questions that you still have that are going to help you make up your mind?" And most of them, there were differing subjects, but most of them were not satisfied with where things are going. We're just not absolutely convinced that Mitt Romney can change things. That seems to be the general tenor of those folks is, well, we think we might want to make a switch, but we're just not sure that the switch would work.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, and I think Romney, at this stage of the game, I think Romney took the approach that he needed to do, which, if you saw his convention speech, was very personal, and he was talking about, his life, his values, his family, and I think a key reason for that is that his unfavorables had been driven up. I mean, he had a tough primary. Barack Obama didn't. So in the clash with Gingrich and Santorum and Ron Paul, it drove up his unfavorables. And then over the summer, spending by the Obama campaign, outside interest groups, that, whether it was the Bain Capital issue or his role as governor of Massachusetts. So I think he needed to speak to people about, here's what I stand for, here's who I am as an individual, as a father, as a husband, and his favorable ratings have gone up. So if there's one, I think, key positive is that Romney didn't get a huge bump because the Democratic convention came right on the heels of his, but he helped to, I think, bring his favorable ratings up. And you hit the nail on the head is that, he's going to have to, I think, be able to articulate an agenda of, here's how I'm going to generate growth, which, again, I think picking Paul Ryan was a very sharp move. It spoke to policy. It spoke to how I'm going to govern. But even conservatives had said, we found Romney's speech to be a little light on policy. We found it to be a little light on how are you going to grow the economy, more than just cutting taxes, right? I mean, what is your, more than cutting taxes or decreasing regulation in certain areas, what is your growth agenda? And so conservatives, we were emphasizing that point over the last week.
And because now what Democrats are really hitting Mitt Romney with is, of course, protecting the rich, ignoring the middle class. And that continues to be the attack on Mitt Romney. And I think he's going to have to, and he's talked about it some, but I don't know if he's emphasized it enough of, no, that's not true. Here's what my plan is.
Exactly. I mean, that's what you saw coming out of Charlotte is this emphasis from the Democrats that, here's our agenda for the middle class. Here's what we plan to do for the middle class. But, of course, they face their own huge challenges. Yeah. I mean, if you look at the economic – throw out Obama's first year. So throw out 2009 and say, hey, that's what he inherited. He hadn't really had a chance to put in his agenda. But if you look at 2010, 2011 through 2012, middle of 2012, the economy has grown at about 2.1%, which – since World War II, since World War II, the only presidents with a lower growth rate than that was Gerald Ford during the Ford presidency, and then, of course, George Herbert Walker Bush's presidency. And they were both, of course, they were not reelected.
Right.
And so, although Ford was not elected in the first place, but so yeah, I mean, if you look at his economic record, we tend to turn out the incumbent. But again, that's why I think Romney was such a brilliant stroke picking Congressman Ryan, because I think he realizes, hey, I'm not going to just back into the White House because of the weak economy.
Right.
I've got to be able to articulate a message. I have to be able to court those middle class voters that you talk about, and he still has time to do that, and that's what will make the debates, I think, very interesting coming up.
Absolutely. In the month of October, there are 3, I believe, scheduled debates during October, which I think will be even more so set those independent voters. We're talking with Dr. James Laplante this morning from Valdosta State University on the Morning Drive, News Talk 105.9 WVGA. And again, these were pep rallies. Interesting that the best speaker from each convention was not seeming the president. I thought Paul Ryan really got the award on the Republican side, or maybe Condoleezza Rice, who also gave a great speech. And the Democratic side, listen, there's nobody like Bill Clinton. That guy can still get up and talk it, and I think he walked away with the Best Speaker award from last week.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's a lovely observation. I mean, Barack Obama basically gave a glorified campaign stump speech that he's been delivering throughout the year. Mitt Romney, as we talked about earlier, did what he needed to do in terms of personal values, and I'm a family man, and here's what I stand for. But neither candidate gave the top speech in the convention. I think Condoleezza Rice, as you nicely noted, did an excellent job. Marco Rubio,
Yes.
Marco, for a Republican Party that knows that they need to reach out to swing voters like Latinos, Marco Rubio did a beautiful job, and unfortunately that got lost with the whole Clint Eastwood talking to the chair. But Marco Rubio, Condoleezza Rice, and then Bill Clinton. I mean, he gave, look, whether you agree with him or not, the bottom line is Bill Clinton gave a better defense of the Obama presidency than anyone in the administration has been able to do for the last several years, and certainly a much more articulate defense on policy than even Obama's been able to give about his own presidency. So, and I think, I'm getting way ahead of myself, but I think this is just setting up Hillary for 2016. I expect her to run, and Bill Clinton is putting himself obviously front and center,
right.
As hey, here's what I did in my 8 years, and don't forget, my wife is still out there. She's Secretary of State.
Right.
And it's intriguing to me.
We talked about that last week, and I think you're absolutely right. That's exactly what he wanted to do with that speech as well. But, in 4 years, Hillary Clinton, and it doesn't seem this way, will be 73 years old. She's 69 now, and that's, I don't know if that's, it may be unfair to say this, but I do think it could be factual that an older man has a better chance of getting the nomination than an older woman. And that may be, I won't sound sexist or anything, but I think polls will back that up. So, but I do think that he certainly would like to see Hillary run for it again. She's much more popular, there's no question now, than Barack Obama is when you look at polling. So I do think they could be trying to set her up in 4 years, regardless of if Obama wins or loses in November. So.
Yeah, and the bottom line may have been that, look, 2008 was simply her point in time, right?
Yes.
When you talk about her age and the fact that she had been the senator from the state of New York, and obviously she did not get the nomination in 2008. Obama ran a very brilliant primary campaign. He got the nomination. So, who knows? In the final analysis, we might say that was Hillary's chance to run. And the age issue is significant. As you know, it's grueling. It's years of running to get the nomination, and then the job itself is not short on stress at all.
Now, so in the next 2 months, as we get closer to the election, obviously polls are still very close, and I still maintain that unlike in past elections where we've seen some separation, that we're all going to be up very late on November the 6th to find out how this thing finally winds up, and it could come to some of those western states like Nevada and Colorado. It could actually be that close when we get down to it. What are some of the indicators that you're looking for, James, in the next 2 months? You mentioned the debates. What else may come out or not come out as a surprise, but jobs reports, the economy? What do you see are going to be some of the big factors to determine the election?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's going to be razor close all the way up to November 6th. Obviously the Eurozone is a key place to watch, because if there's a a greater economic crisis in the region, if there's greater speculation on the currency, that could have huge ripple effects throughout the American economy. But from what political science says, our data is pretty much set. I mean, the political science models that forecast elections actually look at economic growth in the summer. So we actually see that that's the strongest predictor, and it's second quarter GDP. So it's actually April, May, and June. It's the presidential approval in the summer, and so if you look at presidential approval numbers from this past summer, economic growth numbers, unemployment numbers, it says that Obama is around 50 to 50.5% of the vote. It's within the margin of error in these models, meaning that Mitt Romney obviously has an excellent chance of winning this election and winning the presidency. We saw the jobs report last week, right? So the economy is generating jobs, but at a terribly anemic pace. Right. Now, it's not Carter bad. I mean, don't forget when Jimmy Carter was up for re-election, the economy contracted, I think, by almost 7 percentage points in the summer prior to his re-election bid. So, the economic news is not great, but it doesn't doom Obama. Right. On the other hand, for Romney, and this, it's just we're going to see how these issues play out in Florida, Ohio, Virginia, the western states of Nevada and Colorado. So, I mean, that's what I'm really watching is the dynamics of Florida, the dynamics of Ohio. Paul Ryan has put Wisconsin into play. Mm-hmm. That's very much a toss-up state right now. Right. And the thing we might have talked about this before, but look, if around Halloween or late October, if Barack Obama is spending a lot of time in Pennsylvania, Michigan, I think Romney is on his way to the presidency because, and those are states that lean towards the Democratic Party. They're not guaranteed, but if Obama has to spend a lot of time shoring up, again, Michigan or Pennsylvania, that's hurting him where he really needs to be, which is the Ohio's, the Virginias, the Floridas, the Colorados.
And again, we're talking with Dr. James Laplante this morning from Valdosta State on the Morning Drive News Talk 105.9 WVGA. If you look at these elections as they are, every one of them, it seems like, have something different about it. You mentioned Jimmy Carter, who actually led Ronald Reagan in the polls, I believe, the summer before, and then Iran hostage hit, and people really got shaky about it. Of course, the economy had gone haywire. 4 years ago, about this time, actually, about early September, the bottom fell out of the economy. People put that on George Bush. John McCain suffered from that. Sarah Palin didn't help, and Obama did a masterful job of capitalizing on that. So again, I think when it's this close, I do think those debates are going to be huge in October. We all know that Obama is masterful when it comes to speaking. Mitt Romney, I'm not convinced that he is. But I know he's practicing to get ready for those debates right now. I think those things are going to be very well watched and huge factors when it comes to the vote. Yeah,
and I think, and you saw this a bit in the conventions. I mean, I think foreign policy has largely been muted in this election. Mm-hmm. We have a debate that's going to be focusing on foreign policy, but I don't really see, again, unless things change, unless God forbid there's a major terrorist attack abroad or at home that has implications for the United States. But I mean, unlike Jimmy Carter, who faced everything from the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan to the hostage crisis, boycotting the Olympics. Right. I mean, some things that didn't play that well. So foreign policy has largely been muted. I think you're right. I think these debates are incredibly important, and it's going to come down to these policy issues of who can best articulate, I think, a vision for the next 4 years, what I can do to grow the economy, what I can do to grow jobs. And so that's what I will keep an eye on.
I think some of the troubling indicators for Obama, if they do come through, are the fact that it was such a huge youth turnout 4 years ago, and the African American turnout was so huge as well. And I think there's some doubts that those two segments will turn back out in such numbers as they did. And remember, because of those, he won some very close states where they had huge turnouts in those two segments. Do you see that as being something he really needs to pull together again?
Well, I mean, I think he can. I think he can get reelected even if 18 to 30-year-old turnout is not that high or not that dramatic. But you're right. I mean, I sense just on the college campus that there's less enthusiasm about the election, particularly for Barack Obama. So yeah, I mean, 18 to 30-year-old turnout was up in 2008, but not necessarily the key to his election. What was the key to his election was Latinos, African Americans, and then women. I mean, that gender gap that still emerges, particularly among women who are single, unmarried women. So that's where Barack Obama continues to have a large advantage. But he's got to get those groups out. The states you just mentioned, right? Nevada, Colorado. What's the key there? He's got to get out the Latino vote. He also has to get his base out, and that's why these conventions were doing what? I mean, as you nicely noted, they're pep rallies to energize the base, to energize your core constituencies. I mean, what I'm starting to feel a little bit is that Romney is a little reminiscent of John Kerry. I mean, if you remember that 2004 election, there was a powerful anti-Bush vote out there that Kerry was able to tap into. So he had this high floor, if you will. I mean, he had a good chunk of the electorate that was going to vote for him. Problem for John Kerry is at a very low ceiling. He had trouble energizing people beyond the anti-Bush vote. So Romney, let's be very clear about this, right? There is a large anti-Obama vote. It's probably about 40% of the electorate, 42% of the electorate. Now, you can't get elected with 42% of the vote, 44% of the vote. So the challenge for Romney, much like John Kerry in 2004, is to energize those people beyond just the anti-incumbent vote, the anti-Obama vote. And he can sure do it, but he's got to do it in the next 2 months.
You know, we talk about the states that are the swing states that are still left out there, and there are about 9 or 10 of them, I guess, is what generally is configured to be the swing states. And the big one is Florida. 29 electoral votes, much more than any of the other ones, even Ohio and all those with 16 and 15. I mean, Florida's such a big chunk, and I do think that's going to be the key to it. That's why the Republicans held their convention in Florida. That's why I think Marco Rubio was so well thought of, because they want him to help Kerry. That's why I was the only thing that I questioned about the selection of Paul Ryan is his stance on Medicare. Does that scare those older voters in Florida that, wow, this guy wants to cut my Medicare? Is that going to hurt Mitt Romney in Florida, which is such a key swing state?
Well, you know, it's interesting because just over the weekend, my wife was telling me that her mother lives in Boca Raton, Florida, and her mother is a loyal Republican voter, has voted Republican, I think, in every presidential election that she's been in Florida. Now, this is my case study of one, so obviously terribly anecdotal, but her mother was, my wife's mother was saying, well, I'm thinking about voting Obama because I'm concerned about Medicare and what someone like a Paul Ryan is going to do to that. So, I mean, sure, it can play. Although, look, Obama put Medicare on the table, too, as you might remember.
That's right.
When Republicans took over the House of Representatives, Obama said, look, we have got to talk about entitlements. We've got to talk about Medicare. Otherwise, we can't get a handle on the budget. And that's what Romney has been emphasizing. And he says, look, I'm my own man. I'm my own man. I'm not necessarily wed to Paul Ryan's vision on Medicare. But, hey, the bottom line is Mitt Romney, it's just he's not going to be president if he can't win Florida.
That's right.
I mean, I don't want to say it's impossible, but let's be clear about this.
Sure.
The Electoral College math simply works against Romney if he can't win Florida. So he's got to have that state, and you made a key observation. That's why they were in the Tampa-St. Pete area.
Yeah.
I was just reading the other day that a third of registered Republicans are basically in the Tampa, St. Pete, and then the surrounding radius of their media market. So if you look at the TV and radio market for the Tampa-St. Pete area, and then draw a circle around that, you have a third of registered Republicans in Florida. So I find that fascinating, and he knows he's got to energize. And he's got to hope. I think he's got to hope that Latinos, African Americans, and the youth vote that you mentioned is a little depressed in Florida.
Right.
And so, but he still, even I should say as a final point, despite this Medicare issue, don't forget in 2008, Barack Obama won every single age demographic except 65 and over. I mean, he lost by a good margin to John McCain. Mitt Romney will win the 65 and over demographic.
Right.
I mean, I have no doubt predicting that. Now, if the Medicare issue though shrinks that, if he wins 65 and over, but not by as big of a margin as John McCain did, then he's in trouble because we know John McCain lost, and Romney's got to hold the 65 and over vote, and he's got to make inroads with Latinos and female voters.
And those polls, believe me, this decision was not done just by chance. The Republican National Committee and the Democrats, they both have all these polling numbers, county by county almost, and they know exactly who they're trying to target. And all that means is good news for the media markets in Tampa because they're about to be flooded with money from both sides, I can promise you. So.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, I mean, if you're a TV radio station in Ohio or Florida or Virginia, oh my goodness, you're going to be raking it in.
James, always fascinating to speak with you. We'll try to have you on again before the election, maybe a couple weeks out, to look at how it's going to wind up in the finish.
Hey, I'd look forward to that. Thanks,
right.
Chris.
Dr. James Laplante from Valdosta State University. Lots to pay attention to, and that's our pledge to you. Is we'll try to get you as much information as possible. But we think it's your responsibility to pay attention and find out what's going on as we lead up to November the 6th. We'll take a break and come right back. More of the Morning Drive coming up right after this on News Talk 105.9. This is WVGA.
More of the Morning